Hi friends, Pastor Terry here. We are Okotoks Alliance Church, and this is the 10-Minute Coach. Let me take you to the Gospel of John, chapter 7. Maybe you've noticed life can be messy. I've been reminded of that multiple times this week. The complexities of people's lives, when sin gets messed in there, when people's lives become broken, when we get these ideas in our head that we think it can only be this, it must be that. And we've been talking about letting Jesus be Lord. No one's going to set his agenda. We see that again in chapter 7. He is in command of his schedule, in command of his hour is the word that's there. You'll see that in John chapter 7 when his brothers in verse 8 challenge him. I'm going to get my glasses here. My eyes are tired. 6, when his brothers challenge him, verse 8, when he responds and says, "My time has not yet come." And then over in verse 30, where he says, his hour has not yet come. That's why they're not arresting him. Jesus is in command of his time. We run into these things where in the messiness of life, we find ourselves wrestling with what's going on. And again, we see this throughout the Gospel of John, chapter 7. Of course, it's connected, and we've begun to see these "I am" statements. I mentioned it last week in chapter 6. I am the bread of life. Ego eimi in the Greek, and this idea that Jesus is drawing an intimate connection with himself and the Father as Yahweh. This is Yahweh among us, Yahweh with skin on, Yahweh being the personal name for God that he gives in Exodus chapter 3 to Moses. "Who shall I say sent me?" God responds and says, "Tell them the I am has sent you." I am that I am, the self-defined one, is how we are to understand that. And here Jesus is picking up that same language in chapter 6. The same attitude in chapter 7, and we won't actually pick it up until in chapter 8 when he picks that up again, when he says, "I am the light of the world." And just kind of a heads up, when we've been in the Feast of Tabernacles. Chapter 8 continues in the Feast of Tabernacles. It's a feast that is about joy and celebration and music and dance. It's a feast that's about feasting, great food. It's about celebrating the harvest that has come in, praying for the harvest that would come in the next year, and acknowledging that God is the one who is with us. He is present and he provides. And this is what the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Booths, or Sukkot was all about, or the Feast of Ingathering is the other name that is used on this. And a few things that I did not have time to sort of zero in on Sunday, just kind of working our way through the chapter 7, would be this antagonism with Jesus' brothers. They clearly, it says, they did not believe in him. Now we come to Acts chapter 2, and we're going to find out that they do come around. What is it that changes before they come around? The Gospel of Mark, we're told that Mary and his brothers came to take Jesus away. They thought he was crazy. They thought he was losing his mind. And here we have that same kind of idea again. And it's worth talking about. Sometimes the people around us do not see a work that is God, and it's all so very clear. And we see that continued diversity of opinion in verse 10. The brothers go to the festival. Verse 11, the Jewish leaders are watching for him. Verse 12, the crowds are split. He's a good man. No, he deceives the people. Get into chapter 14, Jesus shows up, and as I mentioned on Sunday, we don't really have a record of what he taught, but we still learn from this. I did not have time to go into that exchange between Jesus and the teachers of religious law that happens starting at verse 16, where Jesus says, "My teaching is not my own; it comes from the one who sent me." And he goes on to describe that. You can read that. I think that makes sense. They say you're demon possessed because he says someone's trying to kill us, and then still in the same chapter, it's obvious someone's trying to kill them. So either they don't know or they're being deceptive. But look at verse 21. Jesus said to them, I did one miracle, and you are amazed. Yet because Moses gave you..." So here's what's going on here. I'll let you read it on your own. I won't try to read it for you. But they're accusing him of working on the Sabbath, something that's forbidden in the law. And then the Pharisees, the teachers of religious law, had an additional set of rules around kind of safeguarding the Sabbath, how far you could walk, how much you could carry, these kind of things. And so they're accusing Jesus of working on the Sabbath, saying, well, you can't be from God because you're working on the Sabbath. Jesus establishes this hierarchy of obligations in verses 21 through 24, and effectively says the spirit of the law is what's more important than the letter of the law. It doesn't give us opportunity to be willy-nilly with what's right, what's wrong. But the spirit of Sabbath was that people would receive rest, that people would have relief from work, that they would be reminded that God is the one who made them. He himself rested on the seventh day. We are invited to rest as well. And yet there's this conflict in the law where a baby boy was to be circumcised on the eighth day. Well, if the eighth day fell on a Sabbath, they had made the decision that they would defer to the eighth day rule, work on the Sabbath by circumcising, because that was really in the spirit of the law. And Jesus is saying how much more so is healing a whole man's body compared to following the expectation of circumcision, which was a sign that that child was for God, had been given for God, was part of the covenant community of the Old Testament. Anyway, that's worth kind of thinking further about, but I'll kind of try to quickly get through here. I made, you can read through the rest of the chapter. It's maybe worth coming again to the verse 37. I think it's at the very heart of this passage. The last and the greatest day of the festival, Jesus stood in a loud voice and said, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within." And I've given you some questions on the sermon notes, inviting you to go back to the language that he used with the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well, tying it into here. What is living water? How do we get living water? What does it mean to thirst after Jesus? What does it mean to hunger after Jesus? And then we come down to the more statements about who Jesus is, the Messiah, what is he? And then verse 45, the temple guards come back and we see Nicodemus show up again. And it's just this little indication that Nicodemus is on a journey. And it's going to be interesting to see what God does in Nicodemus's life and through him. This idea of coming and drinking from Jesus, let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink, end of verse 37, then begins to inform something that we struggled with a little bit back in the previous chapter, where Jesus said, "You must eat my flesh and drink my blood." And he's using metaphorical language there, saying that you must consume me, I must come from within you. But we also have kind of what's going on here on the feasting of Sabbath. Jesus is coming, and he's making these extraordinary statements. He is the temple, and from him will come the living water that will nourish and will feed you. And so we eat him in a similar way that a Passover lamb, the lambs, the sacrifices that were part of the Jewish sacrificial system weren't just burned up and thrown away. It was a big barbecue. It was a feast. They roasted these creatures as an act of worship before God, and then they ate them communally together. Well, all of a sudden now Jesus is the one that we feast on. I believe it points to the Lord's table, but it points to so much more than that. The Lord's table is really just pointing to this mystical relationship with Jesus that we are supposed to walk in, where he feeds us, he nourishes us, he quenches our thirst. And what we need to be doing is looking to Jesus, leaning into Jesus, reading about him, praying to him, communing with him in the context of one another, in quiet time as we slip away. These ways of the word devotional, to devote time to, right? To create a quiet space where we allow him to minister to us. These would be the things that we would look to as means of refreshment, means of nourishment in our lives, in order that we would be spiritually mature. Bless you as you reflect on this passage of Scripture. Read it again. Read it with your family. Read it with some friends in your life group. If you're not in a life group, join a life group. I'm Pastor Terry Lee. We are Okotoks Alliance Church, and this has been the 10-Minute Coach. Bless you, and bye for now.